What's up, YouTube fam? Robbie C here, and today we're going to talk about 5 reasons why I believe that you aren't able to get the scores you're looking for. And if we're just sneaky enough, I do believe, ladies and gentlemen, that we're going to have some answers for you. But before I dive in, we got to ask a support question of the day. How you doing today, Chad? You having a good one?
So catch me if I fall.
So for those of you who are unfamiliar, over on patreon.com, I run a little crew called the Birdie Fam. And the Birdie Fam is a community of disc golfers trying to improve. Really, one of the best parts about the Birdie Fam is that it is not sort of centered or revolves around me. It is truly just a community of people sharing and talking. And the primary way they do that is over on Discord. Because it's this community of beginners, you can have opportunities where they are talking about, hey, I just tried this disc. Yeah, I throw about the same distance as you, and this is what this disc is doing for me. Really great sounding board for people to sort of come together and learn alongside each other. And we just dropped a new program that we're doing called the Midweek Muses. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I got this idea from Disney Lorcana, a trading card game where there is a person who hosts a Monday morning space over on Twitter, and he just brings in and sort of has this sounding board. So the Midweek Muses is this idea of we're gonna have a topic, we're gonna bring it together, and people can jump in and ask questions or kind of share their thoughts, and it's just gonna be a weekly sounding board for us to sort of grow and learn together. Yeah, because that's always the goal. But as I continue to work with beginners, I just find that there are certain things that frustrate pretty much everyone when it comes to disc golf. After all, I still haven't found a hobby that is more enjoyable the worse you are at it. So when it comes to playing with folks, whether you're playing competitive tournaments or you find yourself playing in casual rounds with your friends, there's just opportunities where if I didn't do blank, or if I did this better, or I don't know why I can't seem to beat my friends, then I hope today's video is helpful, because I want to give you 5 quick tips that I think you don't really have to physically change your form. You don't have to do really anything different. I think these are all 5 decision-based things that if you chose to do them, you probably are going to start scoring better. Tip number 1 is quite simple and maybe one of the hardest to do. We're going to leave ego in the car. What I mean by this is that so often we walk up to disc golf shots, and rather than choosing the right disc, we try to sort of puff our chests out and show how big and how far we throw, and we end up selecting the wrong disc, making the hole significantly harder than if we just sort of disced up and threw the right thing. So to find myself here at Inverness, this is a local track, my favorite course in town. Definitely one if you ever find yourself in Birmingham that you gotta check out. I did a video on this hole in particular because I wanted to throw a putter at this hole, and I felt like I could get a putter to this hole. But depending on the day and depending how I'm feeling, I know that being able to reach it, I can probably reach it with straight pig, but also I had this A5 in my bag, which is what ended up winning out that putter competition. Now, we got a pretty fierce headwind coming at us right now, as you can see by that tree getting absolutely rattled off in the distance. So, because I have thrown a putter here before, and I have had the opportunity, my temptation is to slot in and just say, hey, let me grab that putter, and let me just try to yeet this thing over to the basket. But my A5 and I have a tough relationship right now because it's just a little more overstable than the slot. So even if I decided to try to go with straight pig here, you can see that it's got the distance, it gets there, and bada boom, bada bing. I'm about 15 feet away from the basket, choosing the right disc. Can I get a putter there? Absolutely, we just did. But there are days where you're feeling a little off. There are days where for me to get the putter there, I'm having to full send it. That's a 270-foot shot that I have to get a hold of the putter well, or else it's just not gonna work out. So what if we checked ego at the door? And instead of feeling like, hey, let me throw a putter here so that I can flex on the whole card and say, oh yeah, I threw a putter. What if I just decided that getting strokes was better than puffing my chest out, and I decided to throw the buzz instead? If I still want to throw it hard, I can aim a little higher and give myself the air room to hopefully swing it in, but I'm certainly not gonna have to throw this as hard Because if I do throw it that hard, I'm gonna find the OB on the back line. So rather than trying to mush something all the way down there, because I've chosen a different disc or a better disc, I can come in a lot smoother and get myself to a similar position that the pig lands. Now, this does carry us into the second tip, which is to think about what the disc is gonna do when it hits the ground. Too often we sit there and we pick a disc based on the distance to the hole, right? Just as we talked about here, this is reachable by a putter for me. And so I can automatically slot into thinking about picking a putter. But I want to be cognizant of what the disc is going to do when it hits the ground. And that can be determined by really a couple of factors. The first factor, and most importantly, is the angle of which it hits the ground. If I come in on sort of a spike hyzer, it has most often the opportunity when it comes on pure hyzer, sort of hit the ground and stick if it's in softer ground with a faster disc, like a fairway driver that has that bladed edge, or a distance driver that has even more of a bladed edge, and it has that chance to really like hit and bounce and stay right there. This is why they call it a spike hyzer, because it spikes into the ground and usually sits. If I come in at more of a pronounced hyzer angle and less of the spike, it has the opportunity to flare, right? It's gonna come in and it's gonna have this sort of flat ground hit and skip and flare off. If I can have it come and sort of rest flat, most often, that's gonna be a recipe to get the disc to sit right where I want it. Now you can achieve a flat landing from a multitude of ways. You can either have a disc flexing, which is where if a disc is overstable, meaning for right-handed players that it wants to, let's say on a backhand, a right-handed player, an overstable disc wants to go really far left, what I can do is I can throw it on anhyzer, which causes the disc to be pulling it to the right, because it naturally wants to go left. This internal battle is going to cause it to sort of land flat. People do this with flex shots on forehands all the time. For right-handed players, if I'm throwing a disc on a forehand, it's giving it spin to make it want to go right. But if I get that outside edge of the disc up, it's going to come in pulling it left. But because of the forehand throw itself making it want to go right, it'll sort of settle and land flat. Now the second factor, that not only is it angle of which it approaches the ground, the speed affects it as well. So we'll call that like 0.1b. But often what I will say affects even how an angle hits the ground is the shape of the disc itself or the type of disc you're throwing. Going back to the first point where we leave ego in the car, often if you are disking up and going to a faster disc, let's say you go from a hole that normally you could reach with a mid-range, but you have to disc up to a fairway driver because you need that extra free, easier distance, we have to be more cognizant about what the disc is going to do when it hits the ground. For example here, I have 5 different types of discs. I have 2 putters, a mid, a fairway, and a distance driver. You can see on the distance driver that this bladed edge is really inclined to get some big skips. Because it's a faster disc, when it runs out of speed, it's going to crash into the ground a lot more. And when it hits on that hyzer angle, it's going to flare skip quite a bit more than something on the opposite end of the spectrum, like this polecat putter that a lot of people refer to affectionately as a peanut butter jar lid. This, if it comes in at that angle, is just really not going to get too much of a flare skip because the disc shape itself, the mold shape, is not very conducive to that ground play. So often I'll use this as an opportunity to get a disc to land sort of flat for me because it enjoys that. Obviously, if you get a disc like this up on its edge and it gets rolling, well, trouble's waiting for you around the corner. This is where discs like a zone really are highlights for lots of people because while it is a putter, it does have that slightly rounded edge there, which means that if you hit it on the right angle, it can get a pretty decent flare out of it, but it is a putter, so it can still land somewhat flat. Mids feel the exact same way. Depending on the shape of the mid, you can get some different ground shapes depending on the angle you approach. All of your disc choices definitely matter when we think about what it's going to do when it hits the ground. Now I know in the comments some of you are probably typing, Mr. YouTube man, what does it really matter how it hits the ground? That's not that big of a deal. Well, I would tell you that it is, because if you don't think about what the disc is going to do when it hits the ground, you could actually have the distance dialed perfectly, but because you don't account for the ground action and you get a huge flare skip out of it, instead of having a putt that looks like this, you could actually end up with a putt that looks like this. Yeah. But that actually brings us to our third point, which is that we don't always have to put the disc right next to the basket. Well, let's take a putt like this, for instance. I had the distance right and I got into this little protected cove, but because I made the wrong disc selection and I went with a fairway driver, I got a big flare skip, which put me over here in no man's land. As I look through this gap, I can't really even see the basket because there's another set of trees that's, yeah, sure, I could probably hit that gap pretty comfortably, but it would be tough. If I find myself really leaning into that 6'3" wingspan, I can get over here, but I am having to hard lean over. And if I go to the right side, I have much more of a traditional type putt. Now, that seems all fine and dandy, but because I could have this amateur mentality of I don't want to putt. My drive put me here. I'd really like to make the birdie, but I have to accept that birdie's probably out of the question here. So what I want to try to do is I want to put the disc as close to the basket as possible. And this is a trap that so many amateurs fall into. And we end up giving away strokes because instead of going with a consistent throw or allowing ourselves to trust the following putt, we end up just trying to throw something wild to make the next throw as easy as possible. And we have to remain confident because you're going to be a good player on the next throw, as long as you believe it. So using this exact scenario, I think that there are some dangers of some possible lines that we could look at here. Let's go ahead and walk through the different scenarios real quick. Option one is leaning into that 6'3" frame and trying to go all the way around. The thing about this is that I'm trying to make sure that I have some form of anhyzer because I can't just put it straight because then really I would end up far away from the basket. So if I decide to go lots of anhyzer, I have the opportunity where I throw too much anhyzer and I've now pinned myself behind even more trees. Let's say that thought is in my head, so I decided I don't want to leave it there, so I go wide. Well, that not only didn't hit the ground, but it's going to be even tougher because now I have even more trees in the way. So the wide anhyzer, while doable, maybe not a shot that, because I'm trying to get too close to the basket, makes the most sense. Next, we have the hero shot. You can see the gap, be the gap, right? I just have to split this little gap right here. And then if I happen to throw it through this gap, then if I can also keep it high and make it through this gap, not only, guys, do I have the opportunity to put it close to the basket, I, even if I count my lucky stars, might have the opportunity to make the birdie. Let's see what happens. Trying to go through. Wow, that was pretty close, which was awesome. I'm glad that I almost rung it up. But obviously, that has the potential to go horribly wrong. I didn't get enough pop on it, and I ended up once again stuck in a similar place of having to go too far around. Yes, there was the possibility of making it, but especially if I am in crunch time and I'm trying to get strokes on my friends, these are the type of decisions that making this decision on hole 6 makes me have to do something risky to really make up strokes on hole 18. As much as we want to believe it, a stroke on the scorecard is not any more important or hurtful in the 18th hole as it is in the 6th hole. A stroke is a stroke. We have to put these mental pressures on though, and I want to help create opportunity to, especially if you're playing against other amateurs, they might be looking at these decisions and might making the wrong decisions as well. And you simply having this information is going to be helpful so that you can not put the pressure on in this moment and let them screw up later on. And then they have to make silly decisions on 18. Now our third option, and I think what people, especially right-handed players, the turnover option might be what they go for, but I think the most common option that people are going to look for is they want to drop in a putt on hyzer. So they're going to see this wide open space to the right, and what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to bring the disc low, and we're going to try to let the disc sort of float next to the basket, which it did. It floated right there. The problem with this method is in order to get the disc to get over there, I have to throw it high because I need opportunity and time for the disc to come down. I also want to make sure that it's coming in on hyzer so that it has the opportunity to move left. This creates huge rollaway potential. In an effort to try and score now, because we're not putting the trust in the hands of future you, you're actually taking a step backwards and losing an opportunity to score and making it even harder on you on the second shot. So what's the right answer? If I told you that you were gonna have 10 footers all day and all you had to do was be able to make putts like this, that would be, for most people, a pretty comforting feeling. Unless, of course, 10 footers and tap-ins make you nervous and you have to go with something like, I don't know, like a turbo slam putt. And in which case, you're probably not watching these videos anyways. So when I find myself back at my lie, rather than thinking I have to get the disc super close to the basket, I can step out and I can, rather than trying to putt to the basket, I just putt to wide open space. I wasn't aiming at the basket. I wasn't trying to get those putters left to the basket at all. I was just simply looking to the most repeatable open shot. And my furthest away putt here puts me in tap in range. Not feeling the importance or the necessity to always just put it right next to the pin, and thinking about trusting that golf is a game of strokes. It's not any less strokes on the scorecard for me to be right here to right here. A stroke is still a stroke, but one of those strokes is way easier to get to and has way less risk of bad potential happening to me. The fourth tip is one that is, I don't know, I think it's talked about, but it sort of goes against some things that we talked about on the channel, and that is quite simply ride the hot hand. What I mean by this is that there's just going to be days where you are throwing a certain disc particularly well. To shout out some discs for my friends, my friend Andrew has this blue Felon that he throws extremely well, and there are days where he's putting it down on forehand rollers and it just feels like he actually attached like an RC car remote to it, and he's just driving it wherever it needs to go. And I often tell him he needs to throw that disc over and over again. My friend Ryan had a lightweight trail in his bag and he found that it was just getting a little too flippy on him. And so we ended up from Foundation grabbing a Heck Yeah trail and put that in his hands. And it is this beautiful trail that Ryan throws extremely well. And there are days where I'm sitting here staring at Ryan throwing that trail and I'm like, that man's probably gonna outdrive me on several holes, because the more he throws that Heck Yeah trail, the better spots he's gonna be in off the tee all day. When you find the disc that works really well for you, lean into it. Throw it as often as you can, because there is a confidence that builds in that disc that you can use. And that's on local courses. If you go to a Pro Tour level course, there's a pretty classic example of this, and I think about even having a discussion with some of the touring pros about this particular moment. I was at the Music City Open. I was caddying for Sullivan Tipton. There was a rain delay, so we had to finish round 2 in the morning and round 3 was in the afternoon. And so we went back to Sullivan's Airbnb where he was staying. And with him were Gannon Burr, Alden Harris, Gavin Babcock. And we were talking about Break 68. Probably one of the most famous disc golf series on the internet. If you've not heard about it, Hunter Thomas over at Foundation had the opportunity for over a year to try and break 68, shoot better than a 68. And on his actual last attempt before the course in its previous iteration was pulled out of the ground, was able to accomplish it. Hunter played out of his mind that day. He would tell you it's the best round of disc golf that he's ever played. I think he actually says it in the video. But there's one disc that every single time it was in his hands, he was throwing it masterfully. It was an MD3, a mid-range from Discmania Discs. Now, some of the guys who were in Sully's Airbnb are Foundation fans as well, and so it got brought up that we were talking about that Hunter had just done it. He had just broken Break 68 and accomplished the goal. And I remember hearing Alden and Gannon say, man, Discmania needs to basically just use that video as an advertisement for the MD3. Oh, you want to know what the MD3 does? Just go watch Hunter throw it, Break 68. It was that good. Ride the hand that is hot. I am sure that there were opportunities and holes that Hunter was not normally throwing an MD3 on, but because the hot hand was with that disc that day, he leaned into it and threw it over and over again. And there are going to be days, ladies and gentlemen, where you have that fire inside of you and you get the opportunity to just crush the same disc over and over again. Lean into it. Make sure that you capitalize on that opportunity. but I will give a word of warning on the other side. Just because the hand was hot that day doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to carry through all the time. There may be another disc that you just seem to throw better on a different day. So while you can have discs that you lean into that you traditionally throw really well, my most famous one being Precious Child, this 2020 Ricky Pig that I love to throw, there are days where if I have this disc in my hand, people should be nervous. And then there are days that I'm just a little off and I'm not getting the disc to flip up like I want it to, and it sort of just breaks the trust in it really fast. Rather than leaning into the disc and just assuming that it was the hot hand last week, so it should stay the hot hand, there's probably another disc that I'm throwing really well today that I need to lean into and trust. And I think you need to do the same. Find the disc that is the hot hand, and maybe you're just really well balanced that day, so you don't have to lean into throwing the same disc over and over again. But if you're throwing a disc well, don't run from it. Lean into it. Take the game plan, make some modifications, and obviously if it's a mid-range that you're throwing really well and you step up to a 450-foot hole, yeah, it's maybe not the disc that you need to throw, even if you're throwing it really well. But don't be so locked into your plan that you don't ride the hot hand. And fifth and finally, pare down your bag sometimes. I have this big old bag full of discs, and I love that I have this Pro version from Atlas because it holds so many discs. And it allows me to feel like I have options and opportunity out on the course. But there are days where when I just bring a few discs, when I just go and play around and I don't bring the whole army of Frisbees with me, that I end up just playing better. Because it does really three things for me. One, it allows me to realize that I can throw certain discs significantly farther than I give them credit for. Turns out when you step up to that 450-foot hole, you may not reach it with the mid-range, but you may learn that you can actually get way farther than you were giving it credit for because you always just defaulted into throwing the distance driver every single time. And then because you know you can do that, there are holes later on in the course where you're going to lean in and actually throw the mid-range perfectly. Number two, there are discs that you think do a certain thing that don't do that thing as well anymore, but you kind of just keep slotting in to try to make them do that thing when you actually may have discs that do that thing better that you've never given a chance to do it. I once again think about a disc like Precious Child that I love and I throw and I use it quite often, but I find that I can use a polecat to do a very similar effect. I was using the Streamline Range to do something very similar to my Precious Child. But if I always had Precious Child and I was always leaning on it, then I never was going to find what other discs I could do things with. So absence makes the heart grow fonder, but also absence makes you realize maybe you can run just as well as you think you could, but you've been leaning on a crutch the whole time. And third, perhaps there's a disc that should be in your bag that's just never gotten the chance to shine, so you need to give it a try. If I've said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. I think one of the best ways to experience disc golf with your friends is a bag swap. I love getting to do a bag swap. If I could convince my friend group to do it, we would do a bag swap every single month because there's just a joy in picking up someone else's discs, especially because in a bag swap, you get to experience often a seasoned version rather than just going to the store and buying a fresh disc, but also check out used sections. Bag swaps and used disc sections help you not only find new fun discs to try and realize what holes in your game might exist, but it also just keeps the sport more fun. I think about the guys over at Foundation who their bags are an ever revolving door because there are so many awesome discs coming through the warehouse. And I'll tell you, a lot of people think if you just got to do this for a living, it would be so fun and you would really enjoy the sport more. And I think you can have fun with the sport for sure, but I think when your hobby becomes your job, it is much less of a hobby. Hunter's talked about it before. He so rarely goes out and plays disc golf anymore unless it's being filmed. Trevor has his own channel that he runs, and I don't know if he would agree, but it gets really hard to find yourself when you're filming constantly. He's part of 3 videos a week on Foundation's channel. He's part of Trevor Staub's channel. It gets really, really tough to get out there and just want to enjoy the sport more. But with that ever amount of discs rotating in and out, it's awesome because now there's a rush when you go to the course and there is this fun feeling of like, oh, this disc felt really cool. I wonder how it's gonna fly. And it almost is like a little hidden mini game inside of the round that helps keep it fun and interesting. So don't be afraid to spice it up. That's gonna wrap up today's video, and those are 5 tips I hope are helpful. Which of these tips stood out to you the most? Which of these tips did you find the most helpful? And was there anything that you were just like, wow, that blew my mind? Or conversely, on the other side, you were like, wow, Mr. YouTube man, I couldn't disagree with that more, you silly, silly guy. Although you may replace the sillies with something a little less kind. And that's fine. So let me know in the comments down below. I read every comment, always looking forward to the comment sections, but I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Please make it fantastic for someone else too. But for now, we are gonna leave you with the birdie.